Let's talk about a story that sounds like it's straight out of a movie. Imagine a 14-year-old immigrant who shows up in a new country with absolutely nothing. And then he builds a billion-dollar empire from something that everyone else was literally throwing in the trash. This is the story of Sam Zoumarey, and it all kicks off with one simple, brilliant idea.
So, really, how do you do that? How do you build an empire from what everyone else considers garbage? Well, Sam Zoumarey didn't just stumble upon an opportunity in waste, he built an entire system around it. This is basically a masterclass in seeing value where everybody else just sees loss. All right, so part one, a boy's desperate gamble. And this story, it doesn't start in some fancy boardroom. Nope. It starts in a tiny Russian village where a young boy's life was about to get turned completely upside down.
When he was just 10 years old, his father died, and his family was plunged into just extreme poverty. Survival was a daily fight. So at 14, Sam makes this absolutely heart-wrenching choice. He decides to leave his mother, his home, everything he's ever known. After a lonely 15-day journey, he lands in America. He doesn't speak the language, has no money, no connections, nothing but a little slip of paper with his uncle's address on it.
So while he's working all these menial jobs, Sam was actually getting this priceless education. See, he wasn't just sweeping floors. He was studying the entire ecosystem of a small business. He was watching suppliers, listening to customers, soaking up every conversation. He was learning the unwritten rules of commerce from the ground up. So, part two, an opportunity in waste. Sam's sharp eye for detail eventually led him down to the busy, chaotic port of Alabama. And it was right here, in the middle of all that noise and action, that he found his golden opportunity. You gotta understand, the banana trade back then had this really rigid system. Green bananas, they were gold. They can survive long trips, so they were the most valuable. Yellow bananas were okay, but they were discounted for local sale. But then there was this third category, bananas with dark spots, what the industry called ripes. To them, these were worthless. They were still perfectly good to eat, but they just wouldn't last the journey. For the big companies, they were just trash. And this right here, this is the core of his genius. Where the industry giant, the United Fruit Company, saw only loss and garbage to be thrown away, Sam, a kid who knew what it meant to be hungry, saw treasure. So he took every single penny he had saved up from years of back-breaking menial work, a grand total of $50, and he bet it all. He bet it all on this one single idea, that this trash was actually valuable. And to put that into perspective, $50 back then is the equivalent of over $5,300 today. This wasn't just some pocket change, you know? It was a massive, all-or-nothing gamble for a teenager with absolutely no safety net.
Now we're at part three, the race against rot. With his entire life savings on the line, Sam was suddenly in this desperate race against the clock. He had to sell these bananas before they spoiled, or he would lose everything.
He loaded his precious cargo onto a train, but right away he runs into the exact problem the big companies were trying to avoid. The train was painfully slow. It made constant super long stops, and with every single delay, Sam is just watching his investment get darker and darker, threatening to turn into a worthless pile of mush. He realized there's no way he's going to make it to his destination in time. And then, in this moment of just pure desperate panic, he comes up with this genius plan. He literally jumps off the train, runs to the nearest telegraph office, and starts sending messages to merchants in all the towns down the line. The message was simple. Hey, a shipment of cheap bananas is coming your way. He was creating demand for a product that wasn't even there yet. And it worked. It totally worked. At every single stop, there were crowds of local vendors waiting on the platform, ready to buy his cheap, ripe bananas. By the time the train finally got to its last stop a week later, he had sold every last one. From his $50 investment, he walked away with $190. He had proven his business model was a success. Okay, part four, challenging the giant. So Sam's model was a huge success, and he scaled it up fast. But, his growing profits soon attracted the attention of the one company he really didn't want noticing him, the giant, United Fruit. United Fruit saw him as a threat, and they immediately started to squeeze him out. They would intentionally delay his shipments. Some days they'd cut his supply of bananas in half. Other days, they'd just send him home with nothing. They even started dumping their own cheap fruit on the market just to kill his profit margins. It was a classic David versus Goliath showdown.
This pressure led Sam to a critical realization. As long as he was depending on his biggest competitor for his supply, he was always going to be vulnerable. To really compete, he couldn't just be a reseller. No, he needed to control the entire system, from the farm all the way to the port. It's a classic case of vertical integration. And this brings us to part 5, conquering the jungle. This big realization led to the boldest move of his entire career. He decided he would go directly to the source, the unforgiving jungles of Central America.
This one decision, this was the turning point. Sam was now evolving from just a clever salesman into a producer, a planter, and, well, an empire builder.
And he didn't just sit in an office somewhere. He got his hands dirty. He bought cheap, undeveloped land and worked side by side with his laborers in the brutal heat, clearing jungles and planting crops. He even built entire villages for them. This earned him a ton of respect and gave him this ground-level understanding of the business that his corporate rivals, reading reports in their Boston offices, could never, ever have.
Okay, part 6, the coming storm. So Sam was now competing head-to-head with United Fruit. But his ambition was about to push him way beyond the world of business and right into the dangerous realm of politics.
He was already deep in debt, and the banks, they saw the whole banana business as just way too risky, vulnerable to floods and droughts and pests. Even his own business partner back in America was getting nervous and refused to fund any more expansion. Every traditional door was slamming shut in his face.
So Sam turned where no traditional business would even think to go, the criminal underworld. He got loans from some very dangerous people at staggering interest rates. We're talking as high as 50%, all to buy out his partner. It was a deal that could either make him a king or, get him killed.
But with that move, he was now in control. He owned 90% of the company, and he made all the decisions. He had bet everything he had, and a whole lot he didn't have, on himself. He was either going to build an empire or be absolutely crushed by the weight of his own ambition. And this is where the story just escalates dramatically. Sam's business battles weren't just about markets anymore. They were about influencing politicians, hiring mercenaries, and literally shaping governments. So the real question becomes, how does a guy who built his fortune on discarded fruit get to a point where he can actually topple a nation?